Hi and welcome back to the channel. If you'd like to learn more about cameras, real-world reviews on camera equipment old and new, and all types of photography related stuff, start now by subscribing and ringing the bell. Welcome to part 2 of my video on shooting with the Panasonic FZ82. So we've all seen these guys out while we're at the local nature reserve or out walking. Huge 800mm plus super telephoto lenses that cost around 12 grand. I don't know about you folks, but that's more than I spent on my last car. I love my hobby, don't get me wrong, but to get some fantastic shots, I wouldn't want to have to sell a kidney. I'm quite happy to get something fairly reasonable as a compromise, and I think that's where this little FZ82 comes in. So we're going to have a look at some photographs I've taken with the FZ82, and I'm going to talk about those images. Just to point out, what I have done is I've actually listed the focal length of each image and the equivalent length in full frame terms. So obviously the camera is described as a 20 to 1200mm lens. The 20 to 1200 is the full frame equivalent. So what I've done is to calculate it, I've used a fantastic little website called mmcalc.com, and you basically put in the sensor size of your camera, the focal length that you took it at, which is the one that's listed with the description of the image, and the f-stop, and it calculates the actual focal length if it was taken on a full frame camera. If you're not sure about how to get that information, if you're a Windows PC user, open your photograph in Windows Photographs. What you do is you right click and then select File Information. That sends a little panel to the left of your image, and that'll give you your f-stop, your ISO values, your focal length, and all sorts of information. So you can use that information on mmcalc.com. What you can do there is you'll be able to see how it compares with your photographs, and you'll see where they start to tail off. That's not entirely unreasonable. After all, we must remember that this is not a miracle camera of any type. It is a budget bridge camera, and the sensor is actually smaller than your little fingernail. In my opinion, the effectiveness of the FZ82 as a wildlife camera is down to 3 things: available light, distance from the subject, and stability. As I'm guessing you aren't him, you probably won't be wanting a cart a tripod up a hillside, nor to the beach with the family. With that in mind, I would suggest that you leave the full zoom range of up to 1200mm to taking detailed shots of close-up creatures or animals or whatever. I would not use it to try and pull in something from a great distance. I've got a couple of examples which demonstrate this perfectly. The first one was at a local nature reserve, and I took a picture of an avocet. It was miles away. I wasn't able to get any closer to it, so I couldn't shorten that distance. I thought I'd take a few shots anyway and see how they turned out. You can see those on screen, they're horrible. Well, the second two are a couple of shots of some seals. Again, obviously they were in the water, I couldn't get any closer, not without getting my feet wet. And despite trying to raise the shutter speed and even trying to raise the ISO, because the camera was saying that it couldn't cope with the ISO range, trying to limit it to 400, I had to raise it 500. And what I was getting was that it was impossible to handhold the camera and get a sharp shot. Ideally, the shot of the sail should have been taken at 1/1250th of a second. Unfortunately, I was busy trying to take a photograph of the sail and didn't concentrate on the actual settings of the camera, which is quite normal when you get excited about seeing an animal. Now, in my opinion, the zoom is best for detailed shots or close-ups of subjects like the shots here of this golden eagle, where you can see I filled the frame with the subject. I would suggest that other than close-ups, try and limit the zoom to 1000mm. So moving on to moving creatures, the majority of the shots I've shown you are of animals at rest, but what about animals in motion? In this instance, I've mainly used this camera in shutter priority mode with the shutter setting set to burst mode. I have found that sometimes the FZ82 does lag a little bit when using shutter priority on burst mode. If you have a look at these two shots of the eagle, as you can see, I've panned with the bird and I've taken the shots, and obviously you're squeezing the shutter button, and obviously the camera just is that little bit slow to actually fire off an image, and that's meant that in that second shot the bird is slightly out of the shot. In this instance, I would have probably been better off using the camera's 4K photo mode. It takes at 30 frames a second, although the image quality is slightly reduced. I'll discuss more of that later. This next shot was taken of a black-headed gull. It was just a single shot. I hadn't set up to do burst mode shots, so it's not a close-in shot by any means, but it was just more of an opportunist shot. I saw the bird coming and it just literally got the camera up and took the photograph. This next shot is of golden mullet in a feeding frenzy in an outlet in Fuerteventura, and it was quite a difficult shot to kind of know when to take the photograph because they were all literally all over the place, and I think, yeah, it could have probably been a better shot if I'd used a full frame DSLR with several £1,000 worth of lenses, but you know, this is from a £250 camera. I don't think that's bad at all. Where the FZ82 really does excel is those places you can go to where the animals are slightly less put off by people, or they're used to having them in the local habitat, or you know, you're going to somewhere like a nature park. I've found it quite difficult to actually shoot wild animals in the UK, whereas when I went on holiday to Fuerteventura, the animals were quite used to people, or maybe they're just left alone by people, so they're not scared at all. Such bird species like the curlew, which I took a shot of, I mean, I could get within sort of 20 feet of that animal and it wasn't bothered by my presence, which in the UK I think it would have flown off. Where the FZ82 really does excel is taking photographs of animals in zoos and nature parks. Most of us won't get the chance during our lifetime to probably see these animals in their native environments. Safaris are expensive, and this is likely to be the closest interaction we're likely to get. But while you may expect going to a zoo is a bit like shooting fish in a barrel, in fact, large animals really need large areas to live in, so the lens on the FZ82 really comes into its own. Being able to go up to that kind of 1000mm range is where the FZ82 really shines. As I said earlier, I found the last 200mm of the focal range to be a little bit flawed. It lacks sharpness and you get problems with the, it seems to flip around and not really focus on anything in particular. And that might be down to the fact that Panasonic cameras tend to use contrast as the means of latching onto the focus point. Plus, obviously, you've got that increase in ISO because of the increasing aperture. So all of those factors combined seem to produce a kind of less than acceptable shot at that range. I've mentioned in the previous video and in this one about the 4K photo mode, and I think it's about time I went into a bit more depth about it rather than keep just mentioning it. This is how basically it works. When you see the 4K photo options, you'll see that there are 3 available. We're only going to cover the first one in this video, but that's 4K burst, which is basically, once you can grasp that one, then you know how they all work. So once you've selected 4K burst, the next time you go to press the shutter button, you'll see that the camera starts filming and will keep filming until you press or release the shutter button. Once you've done that, the camera will then record your clip as it would with any other type of image or video. Now if you call it back up on the rear screen, you'll be able to play through the clip. You can then move forwards or backwards through the frames and then select the frame you want and save that as a photograph. It just writes it as a JPEG to your memory card. The advantage of the 4K photo, as we've previously said, is that you should be able to capture an exact moment, something you can often miss when trying to take a conventional photo. If your only intention is to shoot for small prints, so 6x4s, 7x5s, etc., or just to share on social media, then you'll find that 4K mode works pretty well. You'll be able to at least guarantee that you haven't missed that perfect shot. So folks, that pretty much concludes my little video on the FZ82 and its use as a wildlife camera. It's great for trips to the zoo, birds in the garden, capturing wildlife. It does have a few flaws, and yes, you probably won't go on to win Wildlife Photographer of the Year with this camera, but then again, it hasn't cost you 12 grand. So the next video in the series will be about sports photography using the FZ82. Some say it can't be done. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you have enjoyed the video, I hope to see you again in the next one. Bye for now.